Hello everyone and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry, a fan channel where everything Dragalia Lost can be found. Today's video is going to be a special free-to-play welfare clear of Legend Volk. I put a couple different conditions on this clear. First of all, I wanted to use story or tutorial units only. That's going to mean no gacha adventures, including 3 and 4 star gacha adventures like Xania, as well as no event welfare units like Mega Man or Kuzunoha because depending on when players started playing they may not have access to them. I'm also using draconic essence dragons only, so I'm only using 5-star dragons here if they can be unbound for free via draconic essences. I'm using as few limited Wyrmprints as possible, intended to use none at all but accidentally included some, so that's why I've said few. And finally, my last condition is that I'm using free shared skills only. So that means shared skills that don't cost any tomes and are unlocked for free from story characters. So I thought that this would be a fun challenge, and it ended up being fairly difficult. Here are my eligible adventurers. First of all, Yuden, everybody has him from the story. He ended up being my lead character. Then Laxi was another candidate, as well as our 3-star tutorial adventurers, Aoi, Joe, and Orion. All players get access to these now, they're no longer in the gacha pool. Ended up dropping Laxi and including the other 4 adventurers as my team. And as far as the eligible dragons goes, well, Draconic Essences dragons aren't totally welfare, you do have to summon the first copy, but once you do have a first copy, you can max and bind them for free, so that's why I've included them here as a way of doing this in a free-to-play manner that's accessible to more players. So that's going to be Prometheus, Konohana Sakuya, Agni, Arctos, and Cerberus. Ended up using 1 Arctos, 1 Cerberus, and 2 Konohana Sakuya. Now this was a pretty difficult challenge, but I really wanted to do this. I've been working on this for a couple months just to show that a lot is possible in Dragalia Lost with the tools that you're given for free, that all players have access to from the get-go. And so doing this with these story and tutorial characters, not even including event welfares, I thought was a pretty fun accomplishment and fun project to work on, so I wanted to share it with y'all. And as you can see, we're in the battle now. I'm leading with Orion in this first phase because I need to heal off this plague, roll away a couple times. I know that Aoi's going to backstep there. And another thing you'll find in this clear is, well, there's a lot of room for improvement. So not only am I using very suboptimal characters here, but also some suboptimal play that I'll point out. So I definitely think that if you're feeling intimidated by this or worried to take it on, don't be afraid, you definitely can take it on. As you can see there, that was my first major mistake. Tried to roll through that, but accidentally got caught up in a 4-strike attempt and did not roll through successfully. But I've played through this fight enough at this point that I'm not too worried about anything going wrong in the first phase or second phase. All of that is recoverable. It's really Berserk that ended up being the hardest part about doing this challenge. And compared to doing the same for Legend Kai as well as for Morsayati, the trio of exceptionally difficult quests we have at the moment, I definitely think that Volk is the hardest among those to do with all welfare free-to-play units in this type of setup. So here I am just baiting with Orion. I moved all my characters south of Volk so they don't get hit by his purple attacks, and I'm trying to bait the red lines or iframe them as best as I can. Now that it looks like Volk is going to transform, I switch away from Orion into Yuden, and I'm going to start ramping here with my dragon transformation. I put Arctos on Yuden instead of Konohana Sakuya, and have Konohana Sakuya on my AI Joe and my AI Aoi, in part because in Berserk I really wanted to have a nice strength dragon to increase my 4-strike damage. I also have some Dragon's Boon Affinity Prints here, so I'm trying to transform into Arctos as much as I can, and I found that transforming at this stage is a good time to pile on damage. It's before the wolves get summoned because when the wolves are active, those do give you dragon gauge, but you don't want to be a dragon because if you are a dragon, you're not going to get that extra gauge for KOing the wolves. So my dragon runs out in time. When the wolves appear, I'm able to attack some of them with that Exalted Fire. And at this point, things are actually going fairly smooth. Mistakes have been made. Mistakes will happen in the future, of course, but things were actually going all right here. I had a number of runs that went about this smoothly with minimal issues, some issues in the first phase, but minimal issues, and I'm really preparing myself mentally for Berserk, because that's definitely the hardest part of this with a lower powered team. I see that Volk was close to break, so I went ahead and went for it there. Couldn't really pass Plague onto Volk easily here. It would have been nice to get an additional stun, but I was nicely positioned to not lose much of my dragon form with that Arctos, so it was good to get some hits in with my heightened dragon damage, and then was not really able to bait that swipe in a great direction, but it ended up being sort of fine. I leave to get some Plague on me there, but it got healed off anyway. And here I really want to iframe this, but another mistake, I actually got knocked up in the air, so I think I got lucky but was not able to iframe. Another mistake there, became a dragon, but I ended up getting swiped anyway, and even though I had Plague on me, because I transformed into a dragon and it went away, so I wasn't able to even pass my Plague onto Volk from getting swiped. I was hoping I could so that Arctos would then stun, but this was all still fine. These mistakes do add up, they're unfortunate. I might end up having to see an additional phase here after the Snapping Squalls because of the mistakes I've made and not having Plague on a lot of my characters, meaning the Blood Moon is draining. But it looks like we're very close to the threshold for Berserk anyway. Now here I wanted to iframe this again, just to avoid Plague, although in this case it wouldn't necessarily matter. And there I used my sad Orion damage dealing skill that has such low range it didn't even hit Volk. That's one of the unfortunate things and why I put Cerberus on Orion, because even though Orion has good skill damage abilities, his skill has such short range that as an AI he's rarely going to use it on Volk. And now Berserk begins. And this is definitely the hardest part. I definitely made some mistakes here, but essentially just trying to pile on damage while being conservative in my skill use so that when Volk does his untelegraphed attacks, I have skills available most of the time to be able to iframe them. There are few that I just had to get lucky on that I'll point out when they come, but most of the time I was able to iframe them. Got a little scared for Aoi there since my Force Striking was not quite able to break Volk before that global AoE happened. And here I'm torn because Volk has not yet applied any buffs to himself, so I decided not to become Arctos. I also didn't want to be stuck in a dragon form for a long time and not have access to iframes while I'm in my dragon form. So ultimately I did not shapeshift on break there and decided to save it. At this point I've experienced this set of tornadoes often enough that I know that this is a very deadly phase of the fight. These tornadoes can easily kill some AI, and this was a complete luck situation that they were able to dodge that move. Now I didn't have iframes available for that overwhelming hunger. I tried to use my dragon transformation as an iframe, but that did not work to protect my AI, so that was very bad. Ended up trying to switch around here so that one of my range characters would get the Snapping Squalls and they could take it away, but accidentally switched to Aoi and ended up getting on her, but luckily I was able to move her away in time. And although Volk's HP looks very low, remember this is Berserk, so that's still a ton of HP left. Somehow able to salvage that situation despite all my units being poisoned. Luckily no wolves are around to knock them out, and I'm able to Force Strike here to get another break. At this point, I don't have any other skills charged up, there's no wolves around. I decide it's time to go for the dragon to unleash some damage. Luckily Volk opts for a back swipe, so I'm able to intentionally take the back swipe to leave my dragon form to allow myself the opportunity to charge up some skills. There, let my teammates get overwhelming hungered, thinking that this might be a lifesteal. It ended up not being a lifesteal, but was still fine to break before the purple AoE happened. And again, even though Volk is low, can't quite go for the jugular here. Like, Volk is still going to be able to survive maybe another break or two. So I switched to Orion knowing that the Snapping Squalls is going to happen after that AoE happened, and then switch back to Yuden to get in some more Force Strikes, try go for an additional break. If you're using a melee to navigate the Snapping Squalls, it's just really hard to avoid your AI from following you, and once they start following you, they'll often just walk into the Squalls and end up dying. And now things were actually looking pretty good for me, but still, things took a turn for the worse here at the end. So I thought things were okay, was shields down on one of those attacks, but of course was in a horrible position when that spawned. I even switched to Aoi out of instinct thinking that Yuden had died, but Yuden actually did not die, surprisingly. And even when I switched to him, which was a bad move because he'd take less damage as an AI, even when I switched to him here, he survived, so that was actually pretty miraculous, pretty incredible. Ended up switching to Orion afterward because, again, Volk's HP looks low. Do not get baited in Berserk. It's not actually as low as it may look because his defenses are so ridiculous. So thankfully, this was the final break, and that was my deathless free-to-play welfare clear of Legend Volk. So far from perfect, messy Berserk phase, but I hope this gives you a little bit of confidence that such things are doable, that you can clear this content with very suboptimal characters, far from optimal gameplay, and it's still approachable. It's definitely difficult. I wouldn't say this was easy. This took me a couple of different months of practice and figuring out how to do the first phase and then the second phase, and then finally Berserk took the longest, but I thought it was pretty fun to try out as a challenge. Now to show off my team a little bit here, as you can see, I have Orion, Yuden, Aoi, and Joe. They're their Wyrmprints, their dragons. I'll walk through their weapons. I did have the aesthetic on the weapons, the flaming, but I don't have them 9 unbound except for Joe's. And I did have the augments on the dragons, only half of the amount of augments on Orion's dragons though. So the Maid Crusade, I accidentally used that was limited. And then on Yuden, I also accidentally used the Pecorine print, which is limited, but I think you could switch those out. There might be a better Yuden build here, but certainly the dragon damage didn't hurt since I was using Arctos. Arctos, not an ideal dragon for Yuden either, because I don't have a lot of critical rate, and this comp burns heavily, so the burn-induced critical rate from Orion isn't even really going to help that much. But it is one of the better dragons I had access to as far as dragon damage. My other option was Konohana Sakya, so I figured the combination of dragon damage as well as force striking and overdrive damage in Berserk was a good combination. Aoi ended up making the cut over Laxi because she has Overdrive Punisher built in, and she force strikes a lot in Berserk, so that also kind of helped me. And her setup was, well, the only thing that didn't work in Berserk was Burning Punisher. I ended up going with that over Gauge Accelerator, but her setup was otherwise pretty standard. Didn't include Flurry Strength because I didn't think she could keep up a combo. And then finally with Joe, skill damage, Flurry Strength, Burning Punisher, Overdrive Punisher, and Flurry Devastation. Pretty standard stuff. So this ended up working out for me. Facilities are level 37 on half of my dojos. The other half are at 35. Elemental Altar, one of them is at 42. The other one is at 40. And my shared skill here was Elder Cure on Orion for some extra healing. That is going to do it for today, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this quick look at a welfare clear of Legend Volk. Definitely harder than I expected to pull off, and was lucky to be able to get it done. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time.